Hey, what's up, you guys? It's Issa with Journey to Programming here. And what I want to go over today is software engineer and software developer salaries. I think it's a really interesting topic. I think it's one that we all are curious about, whether or not, whether you're an entry level software developer coming out of a computer science program, that could be undergraduate or a graduate program, or you're an experienced engineer and you are either wondering where you shape up on the scale of salaries, and maybe you're somebody who's really experienced trying to jump ship. You're trying to wonder what is that you could start negotiating about when you do interview and you get offers, or you're super experienced. You've got 10, 15 plus years. You're kind of reaching that staff level, principal level of engineering skill set. What type of salary do you command at that point? And where I want to start with this is I figured let's go ahead and jump into just looking it up on Google, right? So before we do that, I'm just going to really quickly explain kind of the ranges I imagine we're going to find here. And I'll be 100% honest, I have not really looked through the search we're going to be taking a look at here in a minute. I did just put the search into Google, and that's about it. But the ranges I generally know and I see for a lot of entry-level folks is usually you come into industry out of a undergraduate program with a salary in between, let's say 50 to 80, maybe 60 to 80, depending on what company you go to, what industry. If you go into DoD versus big tech, then it's going to be a big discrepancy between that number. And for example, if you go to like a DoD company and you're maybe not in a high cost of living state or city, you might be looking at something around the 60 range, right? But if you're at a DoD company on the West Coast in, say, Los Angeles, you might be looking around the 80 kind of range, right? And that's based on my experience. And again, I was entry level a long time ago, so times may have changed by now. But I tend to keep up with the market, and I think that's probably about right. Now, if you're more experienced, or no, let's actually back up. If you're going into big tech, say you're coming out of your undergraduate program or master's program, and you are looking at the big tech companies, you're maybe interviewing with Google, you're interviewing with Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, all of those big tech companies, right? You're probably looking at an entry level salary and level of coming in at what they call like an E4 level at most companies, maybe E3 right out of college. If you're a undergraduate, maybe that's where they'll place you. And usually you're probably I'd say your base 1 to 150. And then from there, you'll have the additional kind of incentives, right? So you might get a signing bonus on top of that. That signing bonus can vary depending on the company and how heavily they're recruiting at this time, and also how amazing of a candidate you may be, right? So that's kind of that range. In addition to the compensation, like the cash salary, the bonus, there's also usually a potential annual bonus versus sign-on bonus, and those are usually where the differences are less. Let me just back up. So you usually have an annual bonus that's usually going to be somewhere between 10 to 20%, 10 to 15%, and that's usually granted based on your performance at the company. Now, if you're getting a signing bonus with big tech, that's the number that I said really depends on how highly desirable you are as a candidate, and then how much that company is recruiting right now. If they're trying to incentivize recruiting and really trying to hook those offers that they're trying to pull in, then they will incentivize it with a larger bonus. The other part of compensation when you're going into big tech is restricted stock units. So you might be getting equity as you kind of work there longer. And usually what that'll be is that'll be an initial grant you get when you get hired, and it vests over time, whether it be a quarterly vest, a annual vest, it depends on the place you go. Okay, so let's go ahead and transition over to Google. Like I said, I haven't actually taken a look at this, and I don't think it's worth me just guessing those numbers again, or to continue guessing them. So let's go ahead and take a look over here. So let me go ahead and transition this page. So great. And what I think we should probably take a look at here is I just did a really base search here for software engineer salary. I'm not looking up any specific city, etc. Right? I'll just do a refresh on the search. I'll re-trigger it, and let's just take a look at what's showing up. So we could see here at the very top, This is kind of geolocating to San Diego, and that is probably indicative of what I would say a high cost of living area. And you could see the salary estimates they're pushing here, right? So they're not telling you what the levels necessarily are here. They're just giving you a wide range, although they are saying this is a senior software engineer role under the Glassdoor range. I don't necessarily buy that, and let me explain why. This range, 84K to 170K, is quite wide for a senior software engineer role. This is probably taking into consideration really small companies, maybe DoD companies that are less competitive. And this is the probably the low end of senior software salaries that you're ever going to see. At the high end, I think that's actually quite low for a senior software engineer. 170K is probably good, especially if you're here in San Diego, where I am. A lot of our companies are health-based. They're DoD, so you've got a lot of defense. You do have some hardware companies. You've got Qualcomm, you've got chip kind of semiconductor companies and stuff like that. And a lot of those really don't compare to the big tech range. But I'd say they're probably going to be paying you at least 140 plus. I think 170 being the high end here is a little bit low. It probably is not, considering the fact that that is probably the base. The base is likely going to be between like 130, 140 to 170. And then you're probably going to have your bonus and maybe some additional incentives. Maybe you guys have, maybe the company will have some sort of incentive, like depending on how the company performs based on revenue, they might give you a percent bonus or something like that. Maybe Glassdoor is not taking that into consideration. Now, let me explain this number on the left that's coming from PayScale. Actually, let's go ahead and open it up. PayScale, I think, has a very, very wide range of estimates most of the time, and I think they've improved this last 5 or so years on making estimates. But this is probably in line with what you would expect the bottom range of a entry-level person coming out of college in San Diego, a high cost of living city, to get paid at a non-big tech firm or a normal any normal company that's in San Diego, maybe hardware, etc. And this is probably the high range of what I would consider someone with like less than 7 years of experience to reach. Although you could reach kind of further than that, depending on how quickly you work and the company you're at and what their career kind of promo strategy is there. But this looks actually right in line. You can see it also has a bonus strategy. It looks like they're pretty low, kind of on the. Actually, it's a pretty decent bonus. Let's see, 2K if you're at the bottom range is gonna be math. 7% would be, or 10%, sorry, would be what? 7K here. And actually, that's pretty bad. So I actually think that looks pretty bad in terms of bonus incentives. 2K at the bottom range and 15K even at the high range is kind of rough. But at the same time, I wouldn't complain. It's a bonus if it's performance based. Maybe those companies have like a performance based multiplier. It does happen. I think profit sharing is interesting. I assume that's based on obviously you guys work with a company that makes maybe, let's imagine, sales software, and there's a bunch of revenue that comes in and profit, and you get a percentage, right? And that gets split across all of the engineering team. But anyways, this is just food for thought. I don't think that this is representative of certain industries. Like I said, this is really going to be isolated to your normal, like healthcare, your normal DoD companies. And let's take a look, actually. We've got a link to job listings here. Let's see what kind of companies show up here. Okay, so we are seeing a variety. I don't know if you guys can read this clearly. Let me go to zoom in. And let's go ahead and get rid of this. Let's get back to it. And what you're seeing is Honeywell. Honeywell is usually a security type hardware installation company. So a lot of the Like if you have home security, it might be Honeywell. They also do enterprise level. So I'm not surprised they're hiring folks and that they fit into this. And I know they're located here as well. eBay, not really a tech company, retail mainly, although it's auction based, it's e-commerce, right? And I'd call them one of the more older style type e-commerce sites. So they don't pay as competitively as other locations. I don't know what Bay One Solutions is, but let's take a look in here as well. Signal Pet. I'm assuming this is something to track animals. I'm not 100% sure. We can take a look in just a second. Now, this looks like a what I would call a fishing kind of headline or title. They're saying that they're willing to offer up to 350 comp, and it's 100% remote. I have a feeling they would fight you for this, and when you interview, you're going to have to fight pretty hard to get them to push up to that. You're also probably going to need to be really fast, and they're going to be cutthroat. If you don't perform right away, they're probably going to cut you. But let's take a look at this. I just want to see. I guessed at what Signal Pet is. I want to see what this actually is. And it's pulling up LinkedIn. Let's close this. Okay, so it's a veterinary technology space company. They do AI, science, probably the second set of eyes on radiographs. Okay, so that makes sense. It explains why they might be hiring in general in San Diego. We're a healthcare city. We've got a lot of health tech. I'd be curious. I would imagine they'd actually pay a little bit more, although the healthcare for animals market's really rough. I've some friends that are veterinarians, and the veterinarians just are always struggling. It's really tiring, and they don't get paid nearly enough for what they do. So I am thinking that they would not offer more than that 100 range, just off the top of my head. So let's go ahead and back out of the San Diego. I want to go back to this original Google search because that was the goal of this. So let's take a look at something like these posts here. How much money can I make as a software engineer? Oh, this actually looks interesting. So TripleByte, big company, they've got decent numbers. And they're saying that the average salary for a SWE or a software engineer in the US is 150K. I don't buy that. I think that is skewed by the fact that if you're in big tech, we heavily skew that upwards, right? I think there's probably a lot more people making towards that 100 to 130 range than there are people making 200 plus. So, and they do say the top earners earn 200 or more. That's what's kind of saying here. And they're saying the average is 150. Again, I don't buy that. I think that the majority are probably around 100 to 120. You can comment if you think I'm wrong or if you think my numbers are kind of contradictory to what I was saying earlier. But that's an interesting data point. Let's take a look at this next one here. If you're skilled enough to work at top companies, you're paid well. Entry-level software engineer salaries start at 110. I agree with that. So I think if you're looking at big tech, which is going to fit in with this top company type number, then entry-level software engineers do get paid between 100 to 150. And I'd say that's your base entry level, especially in the US. That's without the additional annual performance bonus, the sign-on bonus if there is one, and the potential for the RSU grant, right? So again, I mentioned the RSU restricted stock units. So very interesting. I think that's a cool data point. A lot more information than when I was doing this search coming out of college a while back. Also, even a few years ago when I was changing jobs and I was looking at what I should understand and know about in terms of salary so I can negotiate better. There's a lot more data now that's really interesting. Is software engineering hard? Kind of a random question to come up when I'm looking up software engineer salary. I won't dive into that because I could definitely get on a tangent there. So now let's see. What is the highest salary paid to a software engineer? Okay, this is in lakhs. I'm not going to go down that route. So let's scroll up here. I want to look at Indeed software engineer salary in the US. So Indeed, big job board. Very interesting to see this data point. Right away, I'm seeing 93, almost 94,000 per year. I think that's a good range. I mean, if you're looking at companies in the less high cost of living, so mid-cost, lower cost of living states and cities, this is probably going to be the average you run into. I lived in Texas for a while. When I got my job at Texas at Lockheed Martin, and that was back in, I think that one was 2013-ish, My starting salary there was around 60K. And a lot of the more senior people I knew were making in between 80 and 100. And those were people not just with a 2-3 years of experience. That's not really senior. That would be just like a normal SWE to me. These were people with probably 8+ years at the company. So that was in Texas, where I would say it's a lot lower cost of living. And at that time, it was not nearly as packed and busy as it is now. And take into consideration, this was in the Fort Worth, Dallas metroplex area. So it's not necessarily the highest cost of living, but also it wasn't a low cost of living, super low cost of living area. So I'd say this actually makes sense. There's a lot of engineers in lower cost of living areas. And that's why I was saying, I think that data point of the average being 150 that ByteDance was saying, I think it was ByteDance. Let's take a look really quickly. I don't want to give you the wrong name there. TripleByte was saying is probably skewed. I think it's skewed upward again by those really high, highly paid SWEs at the big tech companies, right? So let's take a look, a little bit more data here just to kind of confirm that. So this is based on about 37,000 salaries reported, and we will actually compare this potentially to another website that I think has kind of become a staple across the SWE world, which I think is levels.fyi. We'll take a look at that in a minute. But let's take a look here. So salaries by years of experience. So like I said, at Lockheed, those seniors with like 6 to 10 years, we're looking at 80 to about 100, something around there. Kind of fits in line here, and this is more recent, most likely. So again, I think that's much more reasonable. And let's kind of skew this here. Actually, let's take a look at what other data is here really quickly. So this is interesting. I think that seeing these numbers makes a little bit of sense. I think that some of them are a little misleading. So you're looking at Apple here at the top, big tech. Comparatively, you've got Centene, I've never heard of them. Macy's, big department store. Octo Consulting, and Meta. Okay, I've got the knowledge about Apple and Meta. These numbers fit in line with what I would call a software engineer at kind of that slightly more than early, like entry level, but not necessarily a senior engineer. Maybe they've got 3 years to like 6 years of experience, and they're an engineer. This is probably what their base pay looks like. So you're probably looking at them being at what I would call like a E4 engineer level. And that's not the case for everyone. I've seen people with 2-3 years of experience somehow manage to land that super high paying, like level 5, level 6 position. I've also seen people internally just be such beasts when they develop software. They're so fast and really good in the specific area they're working on that they get promoted fast. And it does happen, but these numbers look in line with what I would call like a early to mid-level software engineer at big tech. Now, I'm surprised to see this high of a number for Macy's, a department store. I'm wondering if that's just to incentivize people coming to their company to help innovate and change the landscape that they were in. I mean, Macy's as a department store, they're very much having to move away from the brick and mortar concept. They're trying to evolve. They're trying to come up with the current times with technology. So I'm sure they're trying to hire great engineers to help them out, right? So let's really quickly expand this before I go over to levels.fyi. Amazon. I think that this is probably on the low end for that same kind of range, around the entry to mid-level engineer. And again, this is probably your base salary, maybe with a little bit of your performance bonus tied in. But once you add the annual performance bonus plus your stock that grants, let's say, it vests at a certain time per year, it's probably higher than this, to be 100% honest. Now, Tesla, probably about right. I definitely know this salary overall. And you've got a decent data pool for a lot of these numbers, except for Meta. 5 salaries are reported here. I don't think that's a good data point. 33 at Apple, it's okay. Amazon, 142. Okay, that's trustworthy. A lot of reviews, great. So let's go ahead and actually move over. Let's move down. This is actually pretty cool. They've really made this kind of data section much more useful here in Indeed. And this is really great. If you guys aren't utilizing data points like this when you're interviewing and negotiating your offers, then I definitely recommend you do it. Again, I'm looking at Indeed's career software engineer salary section right now, and they've really made this pretty darn useful, to be honest, just to be a quick reference to data points. So they've got a really cool kind of list here of just the highest paying cities across the U.S. for SWEs. Really cool data points. This definitely looks in line with what I would expect. The highest are always San Fran, Seattle, New York. Those all make sense. San Jose and San Fran, they're so close that I kind of consider them the same. I don't really see this being a realistic discrepancy. Seattle, that makes sense. I think the numbers are all probably they're probably skewed because those cities are also a very high concentration of very highly paid engineers because of the big tech companies there. So take that with a grain of salt. There probably are a lot of companies that pay very low, which you should use this data to help you bring it up. But there's also probably a lot of big tech companies, meaning that you could interview with those and maybe see a much larger salary and offer, right? So like I said, this is really cool. I think Indeed's doing a great job here. Let's move over to levels.fyi because I think that's the popular one right now, which everybody loves. I think it's levels. Okay, auto redirected. Very cool. So I've used this for a few years now. I think it's a great data point. Basically, it's a giant reporting forum for people to jump in and report their level at the company they're with and their current salary, bonus, any kind of sign-on bonus they received, and their stock grants. And I think it's a very good, well-designed site because it's just very straightforward. It's simple to use. It's not like Glassdoor, which is a little bit clunky. The navigation's not very easy. This, I think I got my first exposure to it when I was in my master's program at Georgia Tech. Don't quote me, but I want to say this was somebody's grad school project, but again, don't quote me on that. Actually, I think I'm considering another website, so completely ignore that. Nevertheless, let's take a look at this. So the way this works is they've got a regular carousel kind of up here with the recently submit salaries. So this is going to be some huge numbers you see across the top. And don't let this kind of skew your idea of where salaries are. If you're entry level and you just need a job, don't skip out on opportunities just because you see these huge numbers here. But also understand that you can bounce around and you can see these types of numbers if you go to certain companies. So let's actually dive into some data here. Let's go ahead and look at what I would consider to be entry level at most companies, right? So let's see, an associate engineer at Qualcomm is going to be your entry level software engineer. Going in there, they're claiming based on, let's see, how many data points are in here? Very, very few. So based on 2 data points, they're averaging out to about 115-ish. I honestly think that might be a little bit high. I've got friends here who got into Qualcomm right out of college from undergrad, and their offers were more in the 80 range, 85-ish. So I'm curious to see if this is maybe updated. I do see these are recent, but these are also for New York. Qualcomm, the offers I've seen were for San Diego, and it was in the 80 to 90 range. So very interesting. It's an interesting data point, but take that in consideration. There's only 2 data points. These are for New York. New York is a higher cost of living than even San Diego. Now let's take a look. Let's eliminate Qualcomm. Let's add in someone like Amazon here. We've got Intuit, which Intuit owns TurboTax and a few other businesses like that. And then we've got ServiceNow. I'm going to swap out ServiceNow here, and I'm going to take a look at maybe another company that we all know. Let's see, Accenture's consulting. Maybe we could find a DoD company or something of that sort, because these are a lot of tech companies. We've got EA, so they've got gaming companies. You have travel sales. We have Facebook as an option up top. Goldman Sachs, if you want to go to that finance world. But let's pull up something like Lockheed if they have it, or let's see, Boeing. Man, I'm not seeing any of the big DoD companies in here. So in that case, let's go ahead and pick up something maybe a little bit more well known. Let's look at Sony. They've got a lot of teams across the board, and I think they're a great one just to kind of use as a baseline. I'm not sure we're going to see a lot of data points, though. That's my only concern. So let's see how many we have here. So at an L3, that's your entry level. This looks super high, in my opinion, for Sony. And let's see, that looks absolutely crazy because this person's claiming to be an L3 full stack suite with 26 years of experience making 251. So this is obviously a mistake. They probably submit this intending to say they're a senior making 251 or maybe a principal, and now that's skewing the data. But if you look at the bottom one, you're looking at Oregon, I think, and that is more in line with what I would expect a entry level suite to make. Their base is 80, and they've got either a performance or a sign-on bonus of 8K. So that looks about right. Now let's go ahead and play with maybe another data point here. Let's look at Amazon, a L4, which for Amazon is entry level. Your base is between 120, like I said earlier, 100 to 150. They're saying 128. You've got annual stock that you vest, and you've got a performance bonus annually. Let's take a look at the data points. I assume we have a lot here, and obviously I'm not logged in. I'd have to log in and submit something, and we'd see all of the data points, and I can tell you right now, they probably have a lot. All the big tech companies tend to have a lot of submissions. A lot of people are adding their numbers in here, but just the top three in here, you can see you've got two from Seattle, which is likely where you'll go if you're entry level and you interview for Amazon, unless you're interviewing for a odd role at a different location, which will be specialized. So those all have, actually all three roles have a low base, or not a low base, a great base for entry level, but a base in that range of where I was saying 100 to 150. This last one in Arlington, Virginia, has a huge stock in comparison to the others, which is interesting. I don't know why that is. I would love to be able to ask this person what that is. Maybe they've worked there for a couple of years and they refreshed their submission just this month. And maybe they've got, because they've been there for a couple of years, they receive something called additional equity. And that's something granted to people that have either worked really hard in that year, and the company's looking at a way to pay them back with some sort of gratitude. And that could be additional equity as an additional grant for that work they've done. So very interesting. Again, base about 130, and then they've got a performance bonus of about 20 to 30. So right in line with what I was saying for big tech. Now let's take a look at Intuit. So tax company, I think that this looks really high, 114. Although because they're a software company, I'd say they are a tax tech company. So let's see how many data points we have. It looks like we've got a good amount. So it looks like I would consider them to be just as competitive as other big tech companies for the most part. I bet you this does not scale, though, as you go up the chain to higher levels. So let's take a look at that. When you go to level 2, I assume this is probably somebody with maybe 3 to 5 years of experience. Then your base goes up to 130. If you're at big tech, somewhere like Google or Meta, I assume your base, when you get to that, what I would say the equivalent is L4 there, would probably be around 150 to 170. Maybe a little bit lower. Maybe I'm wrong. I think maybe 130 to 160 is more likely for a equivalent to what they're calling a software engineer 2 here. Now, let's take a look at what their senior is, which at big tech would probably be an L5 or an E5. They're saying their base is 160. Again, this is lower than big tech. Again, this is big tech for for tax software. So the numbers are still great, but they're going to be lower than your standard big tech companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, Apple, and all of those. So this is lower. I think at Meta or Google, you'll be looking at a senior engineer at a E5 level, probably with a range of 170 to 210 for their base. And then they'll probably have around 50 to 100 in stock per year and a 15% bonus, pretty average. So I think these data points are interesting for that type of a company. Definitely something you can use if you're interviewing for Inuit or a competitor. Definitely food for thought. So check out levels.fyi. Now, I'm going to go ahead and stop us there from looking at levels.fyi. And what I want to talk about is taking the data you see here into consideration when you're looking for a job and you're right out of college. You may not be able to land, and it's complete luck, to be 100% honest. You might not be able to land that high paying big tech job right out of college. And it's really just the luck of the draw. Maybe you interview and the interviewers ask you some really hard questions and you haven't prepared enough for leak code. But either way, if that happens, don't be afraid of taking those jobs at, let's say, Intuit or at Sony or at Lockheed or General Atomics. They're not going to pay as well, but you're going to gain a lot of critical experience. You're going to get a lot of knowledge on how to work with other engineers, how to work with other cross-functional teams, how to work with a manager. Those are all going to be super useful when you try re-interviewing for a big tech job. And during that time, you're still making money. You'll have time to kind of learn the ropes. You'll have time to progress and develop those, let's call them leak code skills, because I know you all know what leak code is. If you don't know what leak code is, go ahead and check it out. That's LEET code. And that's probably the baseline website for practicing the interview questions, right? So just wanted to throw that in there. Don't let websites like this skew your data. I see that a lot nowadays. There's a lot of entry-level engineers that I talk to, I run into. If I'm working at a coffee shop and they know who I am, or they see I'm developing software, they might ask some questions and they may tell me what they're thinking the salary should be. And I sometimes kind of have to laugh at their numbers. They're inflating them so much that it's kind of sad to see, and it's kind of difficult because you can't expect to be making those huge numbers always. But you should also know your value and know that you can negotiate and you can try for it. Again, give it a shot. Interview with those companies, but don't be disheartened. Take the other jobs. 60 to 100 is great, and you'll learn a lot. And then be willing to jump jobs. Don't be afraid of that, especially early on in your career. In some of my other videos I've mentioned, I did that when I was earlier on. I don't do it as frequently now. But again, it's work, it's your career. But early on, people really aren't going to hold that against you at all. And as you're developing your skill sets, don't get caught in a loop where you think you have to dedicate your entire life to those companies that are there. Spend a year, spend 2 years, then go ahead and change. Especially if they're not willing to promote you or move you to new and better technologies or topics. And then also, if you just want a big salary jump, honestly, the fastest way to jump your salary up 15, 20, 30, 50% is to jump to another company that's willing to pay you more. So again, I'm going to end there. This is Isa with Journey to Programming. It's been a while since I've been making these videos. I'm trying to make them more frequently now. I hope you guys are having a good one. And yeah, if you have any questions, please do write them in the comments or send them to me directly. Sub to my channel. I really do appreciate it. Have a good one, you guys.